if we were a regular full, 40-hour class, except it's compressed down to 3 hours. And it's a delight to be here. I guess the way we've always started, besides the introductions and the sharing that you've just had, is to take a look at where transformative mediator fits in the general spectrum of conflict. So I get the first slide. Just say that we recognize most traditionally. Dusty, can you give me a slide that says that there are okay, right, theories of conflict. So traditionally, this perspective on conflict is that falls into three general categories of power theory. And if you think quickly what we mean by power, first of all, conflict expressed through power through military means, conflict expressed through power. He who has the gold, that's the golden rule. Who has the gold rules. And in mediation, we do find people coming into our mediation sessions in a situation where there's a conflict, in part, is being expressed or carried or through power imbalances or whatever, or the fight over power. So then the next category, which we are all familiar with, are rights theory. In a class, regular class, I'd ask everybody to chime in as to what they think each of these is, but we're expediting this refresher. So the main thing we come in contact with as mediators in the world of rights is the rights in law, what the rules are, and those are your rights, so to speak. You can engage attorneys and each argue, attorneys or you on your own as participants in a court situation can argue which rules apply and which rules don't, and that's how the decisions are made under a rights base. But again, in a mediation, our clients come in and they often think they have certain rights, and that's where they may express themselves. And then there's needs and interests. And those of you who've read Getting to Yes, Uri and Fry and Uri and Fry, classic conflict guide, resolution guide, recognize that the idea of looking at a conflict in terms of needs and interests is that there's a limited size pie, basically. There's only so much resources, financial resources, if people are separating and need to establish two homes. There's only, if they're caring for children, then there's only so much time with the child. So they have their needs, and how can they divide that pie? And that's the focus of many mediation practices, how to divide the pie. And John Alfond earlier talked about his role as an arbitrator, and often that he's going to be, I'm sure he could share with us, but he may be dealing with rights, but he also may be dealing likely with needs and interests, how to divide a limited pie. So the staying a moment with needs and interests, the idea is that it's a rational person or persons, group of people, if they're clear in their minds about what their needs and interests are, their respective needs and interests, they can work out an arrangement, a resolution. if you think about it, 99.9% of all differences are people get settled one way or the other, but often just by having a conversation and working things out, recognizing, well, it's my turn to pick the movie, and then your turn next week or whatever. So most people operating on a rational basis do pretty well with needs and their respective needs and interests. But when people get to the point when they can't resolve their conflict and things heat up, then there are emotional aspects and informational shortfalls that prevent the rational resolution of, oh, this is my need over here, and this is your need, and we can work this thing out. The Jack Sprat and his wife eats no fat, licks Jack Sprat. What is it? Well, whatever. His wife, Jack Sprat could eat no fat. His wife could eat no lean, and together they wipe the potter clean. Okay, so if you can't do that, and rationally, then we find that in most cases, and when we review with our students what their experiences are with conflict and how they felt and how what stymied them, it was invariably what the next slide says, that the next one after that. Oh, okay, no, leave that, okay. That our perspective on as a transformative mediator is that we see the conflict initially and strongly as a crisis in the interaction between people, an ability, a struggle to communicate. It's a normal situation, it's situational, but it's what gets in the way of that rational, oh, well, now that we'll sit down and get our pencil and paper out and work out a plan. Something gets in the way. And when we talk about and introduce the idea of mediation to different groups, whether they be inmates or our students, then regardless of their personal and educational and financial backgrounds, they all come down to the recognition that the thing that gets in their way to do rational problem solving with another person in conflict is that they are not communicating well. There's information that's missing, there's not a willingness to listen, there's a difficulty to express. And so that's the essence of our transformative perspective. So as Dusty is going to show and lay out in pictorial form as well, it's our initial view of people who come into our mediation sessions. And as we work with them, we see them in this context, basically, hopefully resolving their difficulties to communicate, to share, to listen, and come to rational decisions. So Dusty, why don't you take over and talk about, but I'm happy to answer any questions. Right. So it should be very familiar to you all. Okay?
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me see here. Same share. So let me stop share a minute. So what John's talking about is this whole business of what we do. This is building to what we do as transformative mediators.
Dusty, we don't see you. Dusty.
Yeah, for some reason, my video turned off.
Okay.
I wasn't trying to hide. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to work not so much on, the issues as a more directive mediator would be to do, but to work on helping the participants get straightened out, basically go from a position where they're feeling weak and uncertain about what they need or feeling helpless, can't move forward, So that's the part about needing to bolster them as they gain empowerment. And once they get feeling a little stronger, then we can go ahead, and they can go ahead at that point and start hearing what the other person's saying, and et cetera. So I'm going to go back to share screen here and go down a slide. So here's the part about empowerment. You know, and while they're in that crisis of human interaction, like I said, they're feeling unsettled, confused, fearful, you know, disorganized, unsure. As we use our skills primarily in the area of profound listening and reflection of what they're saying, we're going to help them hear themselves and sort things out, and they're going to become more calm. Where they were confused, they'll be more clear. Where they were fearful, maybe thinking the other person's out to get them, they'll get a little more confident that they're in control of their own fate. They'll get more focused, and they'll be more decisive. You know, they'll go from, well, I don't know where to go with this. I don't know how we could ever make this better, to, oh, okay, I've got some ideas. So that's what we call shifts of empowerment. And we see these routinely in mediation. We see people settling down and just sorting things out for themselves. Once they achieve some of that, they can begin to work on opening up and hearing the other person, and maybe if not agreeing with them, at least beginning to understand or be open to the other person's perspective. So where they were maybe really sort of had their guards up, being extremely self-protective, they can begin to, you know, pay more attention to what the other person is beginning to say. And we'll talk in more depth shortly about these skills, this, you know, profound listening, the reflection, the summaries, what have you. Where they were defensive, you know, that person is just trying to cheat me or get me or manipulate me, they may begin to hear where the other person is and see them as less the enemy and more somebody with a different perspective. They'll go from hopefully from more suspicious to more willing to accept the other's good faith. And where they're incapable of stepping outside their own frame, they're going to be able to hear that other person, see the other's perspective. Again, they may not completely agree with it, but they'll start to understand what's informing where the other person is. So Bush and Folger in The Promise of Mediation came up with this wonderful chart, which is, it's kind of the pictorial of our theory on one page, which I think is really kind of a neat thing. So here's the folks in conflict and over here, and we can see that in terms of themselves, they're feeling diminished, weak, vulnerable, fearful, confused. As we support them, they'll begin not all at once, but they'll start shifting over to this right-hand side where they'll feel stronger, a little more confident in what they're doing, more clear on what their options are, and able to see that there might be some choices to make the situation better. Those are empowerment. Any little thing is an empowerment shift. And usually in the course of a mediation, people will take sort of 2 steps forward and 1 step back, and then, you know, 1 step forward and 2 steps back. It doesn't all happen in one fell swoop. But the minute they walk in the door, there's been an empowerment shift. They chose to come in voluntarily to mediation. The minute they pick which seat they want to sit in, they're taking charge of where they are at the table. Do they want to sit next to the other person? Do they want to sit across from the other person? It's up to them. And then when we start the mediation, you know, we go through our welcome opening statement, and we hit all the highlights in that opening statement, and John's going to talk about that in a minute, but start to frame the mediation as a conversation in which they will be making decisions. They will be telling their story. We're just there to support them. Once they're over on this right-hand side in terms of empowerment, they are strong enough to start back here on this recognition problem. So they can inch their way across from being self-absorbed to more responsive to the other, defensive to being more open, suspicious to being able to see the other's perspective. This describes the sort of journey of our view of conflict, which is starting out in this death spiral of getting crossways with somebody, and that interaction is negative, it's destructive. We're not helping ourselves out when we're in the middle of conflict. Demonizing, we're either thinking or verbally expressing what and who we think the other person is, that it's probably not pretty. And alienating, obviously, we're kind of working on being enemies here. As they go through these shifts in recognition and empowerment and recognition, they come across this way, and as they complete the loop, that interaction becomes more positive, more constructive, humanizing. We're not silently name calling the other as much anymore, and more connecting. We're maybe even able to find common ground. So that is the journey of conflict transformation. And I'm going to turn it back over to John when he's ready.
Why don't, Dusty, why don't we pause for just a moment and see if there's any questions or comments or concerns about anything that's been said so far?
Speaking for myself, this is Katie. I don't have any questions.
This is John. I have a comment. In my experience with mediation, probably the most important part of seeing the shift and getting towards a settlement is when the other party sees the other party's perspective and understands it and is willing to work with it.
Right, so go ahead.
No, so that's really important, that being able to open up and see that other person's perspective and realizing that there may be common ground there. And then that once that happens, they really start shifting, and they on their own may begin to negotiate or barter or whatever it is. But they can, if they choose, work towards that agreement, just like you said. So they've made the shifts of empowerment and recognition, and now they're strong enough and connected enough to move forward if they want to. And that's another thing. We say over and over, we're not about getting to settlement necessarily. We're about them becoming, strong enough and connected enough to decide what they want to do. So we're happy, if their resolution is that they don't want to talk to each other anymore, and that works for them, that's fine. That's just nice.
Well, Dusty, that was a very key thing when you said that earlier, that we don't focus on the issue. And like you said, if they settle, they settle. If they don't, they don't. And as a reminder, just looking at the slide that you have now, as mediators, we ourselves are going through these same emotions. So it's always, when I see this as a reminder, it's very helpful that we internally may be going through the same thing while we're trying to help the participants.
So we can get a little whiplash here as we're going through the same kind of deal. And you're talking to sort of monitoring our own tendencies, our own thoughts there too, that we don't want to get sucked into that. We want to stick right with them. And what you're kind of describing too, Willetta, is this is a backup slide, but the participants are doing this. We're helping them as they talk about what's going on. We're out of the opening statement and they're beginning to work. They're going to decide in any order that they choose. Are they going to just explore the situation, tell their stories? Are they going to launch right into, well, what could we possibly do to get out of this? So at some point, probably on multiple points, they may begin to deliberate on an option or several options. And eventually, if they choose to, well, they will make a decision of one way or another. They can decide to leave the room. They can decide to settle on a dollar amount. They can decide on whatever. They're working on the issues. We're around the outside of this chart here. We're helping support them in terms of empowerment shifts and recognition shifts. and having confidence that they'll find the way through this that they choose. Good
Right.
comment.
Right. And I was just going to say that, the empathy part of it is helpful, and it's also hard because, like you said, Loretta, some of these things they touch us in different ways. And I remember the different types of mediation, the more business centered mediation, like a business deal or landlord tenant or something like that, versus the child, custody, the divorce ones. Those, I just remember the two different types being so different in how the mediation progressed. And that one step, two steps forward, one step back, Dusty, that you mentioned is so true, because especially in the more emotional ones, it's like you think you're making progress, you think you're moving them to that different part of that model, and then next thing you know, you're back where you started. And so you just kind of go back and forth. And so it's like, there were a few times, John, I know that we did some pretty interesting child custody cases, and I wondered if we were ever gonna, just what's gonna ever happen with this. And I'm sure they all worked it out, but at times it was very difficult to see how it was gonna progress, to be able to impact that. So anyway, it's good. That's a good slide. I remember that slide from before. I like it.
That's so true, Pam. And interestingly, we're using the same skills regardless of the case, but the progress of the case, the path that the participants take can be much different as we, depending on how thorny their issues are. A little consumer, merchant case might seem kind of straightforward about the $50 purchase. Or it may not, because probably there's always more. It's not just the dollars, as we learn too. But other types, where it's more interpersonal, they can be a little more volatile. We just follow them and do what we do.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And John, you want to move on to opening statements?
Yeah. Yes, I'm just picking up on what was just said, that we use this, and we go, as we talk about the mediator's toolbox, we approach each mediation, regardless of the venue itself, in the same way. And and we use the same tools, and we stay out of the way in the same way. We follow as opposed to lead. And I think that, and we keep in mind, ideally, at least I try to keep in mind that diagram or something akin to that to get a sense of where people are and what the challenge is. And the challenge is initially a matter of empowerment and recognition, shifts supporting those. So the first thing we do basically when folks walk in the door and have some introductions, and somewhat along the line of what Vicki did when we all came in, we settle down and talk about, the mediator gives what's called an opening statement and reviews consent to mediate form. We might just put that form up, Dusty, although the print's small, so just because John has not seen it, but you all have seen it. And I did send it out to you, so maybe you don't need to see it there if you got it. And Dusty, you have the ability to move that around left and right, I think, as well as up and down. And I'm not going to go through this form with you in any detail. But with a copy that you have, you recognize the first thing we do is basically say to our clients that we're here to support a conversation and that we're okay if they don't reach agreement. We get the message out that we're not invested in their reaching agreement. You could say from a psychological point of view, it's a paradox, okay? We're saying we're here to mediate, and you came thinking we're gonna help you solve your problem, and we say, wait a moment, we're not, that's not where we're going. We're going to support your conversation. So that paradox is really important to recognize, because people do come to us with the expectation generally speaking, a misunderstanding of what mediation is going to do for them. Because they often, we get the mediation, and they'll tell you why you're wrong, and they'll tell me why I'm right. So the opening statement, and we'll do a practice of opening statement. Let's see. We will when we do role plays.
John, I had a question on this. I wonder.
Okay.
I noticed that in the training last spring, the consent to mediate form is different from the one you sent out. The one you sent out has a new paragraph 10 that the one in our training didn't have.
Right.
And so before you leave this consent to mediate, could you just mention that? I think I know what they're looking for there, but I want to be sure.
Dusty, can you show us paragraph 10?
Unfortunately, I think I've got the old form.
Oh, he's got, okay.
You got the wrong one. Oh, I sent it out. Okay. So, but I did send the copy to all you refresher trainees. Anyway, so the paragraph 10 it basically deals with the reality that we have people participating who are not all in the same room, or for various reasons cannot be signed up the same piece of paper. So a traditional contractual clause allows agreement to, in part. So it can be signed in parts. And if there are 4 parties or 2 parties, when you collect them all together, individually signed, it becomes a binding contract or agreement. And so the other thing that I sent you has a couple of sentences at the end on Zoom mediation, on video conferencing, reminding people that they should be in a safe and private space, and there's no recording or audio or video. So those are changes, Katie, that we made just to reflect the reality of this COVID-19 thing, and also actually more in St. Mary's, we've been doing mediations video for a number of years, because we work with St. Mary's often with clients who are one of whom is tied to the Navy base, and therefore, for whatever reason, are not on assignment or living, or they're separated, and they're talking about dealing with child custody issues, and so they're not in the same room. And now we've got this DocuSign capability, so we're now actually getting signatures, pseudo signatures on the same page. So we're catching up with the technology there. So in an opening statement, what I do, and often, by the way, our clients now are getting a copy of this consent to mediate form through the office from Sherry, direct from Sherry Tardio or Mia Bowers, or Mia's assistant, and are signing this thing using DocuSign. So when we open the mediation, they've already seen that and often signed it. We do basically an opening statement that highlights those elements. And we'll ask you later on when you do a role play to look over, have that form with you, excuse me, and basically go down and highlight those things and read the word for word the confidentiality piece. So let me just say something about the confidentiality piece and make sure that we're doing just fine. So the confidentiality piece has a very important element to it. We all understand, and it's expected that we as mediators and staff will maintain strict confidentiality of what we hear, with a few exceptions relating child abuse, abuse of threats to do bodily harm. We used to have a clause in there that says elder abuse, but we took that out and just the threats to do bodily harm, and anything relevant to a complaint against the mediator or the mediation center. Those are exceptions, but we keep strict confidentiality. And that's what we expected. But the thing you need to remember as a mediator is the second part of that confidentiality, which is the piece of the Maryland law that also binds you as participants, that you, quote unquote, may not disclose or be compelled to disclose mediation communication in any judicial, administrative, or other formal proceedings. So you really need to highlight that because people don't really know what they've read. And what it means is, and I always give an example. So you've got a debt to settle, and one of you offers to settle it for N dollars, and the other says no way, and you go to court. You cannot, in the court, say that in the mediation he offered to settle it for this, or he refused my offer, or any other detail, or he got up and walked out of the room, or he stood on the table and pounded. Everything that goes on in the mediation is off the record unless it reaches agreement, gets put into some form of contractual form, and gets then presented to the court as a joint statement, and only what's in that statement is what's admissible. So it's really important because it opens up, and again, I emphasize this, it means that this is hopefully a safe place for you as participants to come up with ideas, to put things on the table, to think about them, to change your mind, to go between sessions and talk to some other advisors and change your mind or come up with new options. And it strengthens the value of mediation. And it's one thing I really feel that you should definitely emphasize. Okay, so they've seen this before. They probably signed it. If not, if this is the first time, then you go read through it. If you're doing day of trial, you'll be reading through agreements like this, different forms. So, any questions about the opening statement? And as I say, when you do a role play, you have that sheet in front of you. You can pick and choose as you go down, in your own words, highlighting the essence. But you're basically, of mediation, you're basically setting the stage. It's a conversation. John, are you a question? Oh, no, okay. Okay. All right, well, we're rolling along.
Okay, so Dusty, before you get to the other slide, hold that up a second. Because really, we're starting to talk about the skills now, our mediator skill sets. And honestly, from my perspective, if you offer that opening statement and it's warm and welcoming, and just like John said, you have this conversational tone where you're setting the stage for the mediation. And then you follow that up with your wonderful listening skills and your reflective listening to support the participants. You are well on your way to having a very, very successful mediation. And honestly, that to me is the secret of transformative mediation, because it's setting the conversational tone so they feel comfortable, and then it's supporting them and following them in whatever they say. So we say that that listening is one of our most important skills, and it's really the most important gift that we have to offer as mediators. And good listening really, really requires staying in that moment. So Dusty, can we have our listening like a dog, staying in the moment? And those of you who have dogs know exactly what I'm talking about, because they are in the moment. They are listening for understanding, aren't they? They're trying to understand what you're saying, and they're listening with empathy. You can see the empathy in their eyes, that they're really caring. They're listening without judging. They're not giving advice. They're not trying to fix your problem. They're not offering their opinions. They're not asking questions. They're not stealing the other's story. So if we as mediators can listen like dogs, but the thing is, we have this thing as humans that dogs can't offer. And that's that beautiful, beautiful skill of reflection. So for all of you, and I know you've all been mediators, why do you think that reflection is so important? Why is that? What's important about reflecting back what the speaker is saying?
I think on one level it validates what they're saying. It's like, I heard you, and that kind of thing. And I remember the first time in mediation when I reflected and the other person, the client said, yes, yes. And it was like, that felt so good, because it was like, okay, I heard you correctly, and I reflected that correctly, and you validated that I heard you. And so it's just a whole big kind of thing. But I think that reflection I think it's, like you said, it's critical. It's a critical piece.
It is critical, isn't it, Pam? Because they are feeling heard, and you're showing that you heard them, that they are being heard. And isn't that the most important thing that all of us want, is to be heard? So it is so important. And what were you going to say, Willetta? You were going to say something.
Just to piggyback on what Pam was saying, reflection is also critical. They get to hear themselves, because you mentioned the word, they get clear. So if you're reflecting back what you heard, what you saw, they get to validate themselves, whether or not, it's, oh yeah, yes, or they can get clearer and say, well, no, that's not really what I meant, right? So we give them an opportunity to kind of hear themselves, and for them to get clear and to respond the way that they want to respond.
Exactly. They can hear themselves. They can hear what they say. That gives them an opportunity to correct it, to edit it, to say, yes, that's exactly right, or no, that's not quite what I meant. but that's their opportunity to be able to kind of correct any misunderstandings that might have been there. And one other thing, well, there's probably lots of other things, but is there anything else that you can think of why reflection is so darn important?
I think it also changes the traditional progress of conversation, because generally when somebody is done speaking, the next person takes their turn and says something. Well, this changes that progress, because basically you kind of have a stop sign there where you say again what the person has said, only in slightly different, language. And that's not typical. We usually get done talking and then somebody else talks and then another person talks. But the whole idea of slowing that down, where one talks and then it's reflected back before there's another conversation, I think is different from what people normally experience in a conversation, and therefore may help direct their attention more to what's actually said.
Yes.
And Katie, saying something further on that, so many people in conflict are, while the other person is making their expression, their concern, their issue, whatever, the other person is planning what they're going to say. So their mind isn't even on what's being said across the table. Their mind is too often on how they're going to dump on that, back across the table. So slowing down the conversation, as Willetta described, giving everybody a chance to hear themselves and hear the other person is basically provides a support for empowerment.
Yes, absolutely. And like you said, it allows that other person to hear from a neutral or from another voice. And so maybe they didn't hear it when the speaker or the other participants said it, but maybe they will hear it the second time, from the mediator, from the neutral, from that other voice. So that's why, yes, and there are probably many, many more reasons, but that is why reflection is so gosh darn important. And if that's all we did the entire mediation, it would be a success if we do that. And Dusty, can we have the next slide, because it tells a little bit exactly what reflection is. So what do we mean by reflection? So it's done with one party at a time and with complete engagement with that party alone. And so you're not moving back and forth. So when one person speaks, you're reflecting back, trying to mirror, using as many of their own words as possible. So that means not reframing it or not trying to interpret it or not even adding to it, which is very, 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 very hard to do for me personally, because I do hear something more, with what they're saying, and I want to add that. And so the best practice is just to mirror back in their words, because if you're using their words, you're honoring their words. So they could use one word and I could interpret that into another. If they said that they were angry and I said, you really sound like you were enraged, that is not honoring their word. It may or may not be closer to what they meant, but when they said that they were angry, that's the word they chose. So that's the word we want to honor, even though we know maybe a much better word to describe it. But we have to trust that they know themselves and they know their situation better than we could ever hope to. So we tried to, and just going back one more time, when a reflection is on one party, so we're not reflecting, I wouldn't be reflecting to what Pam said and then going back to Willetta and saying, and then you said blah, 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 blah. So that would be more like a summary when you're talking about one subject and one party says one thing on it and the other said the other, and you're going back and forth like that. So we'll talk about summaries later, but a reflection is just done with one person. And a reflection should really match the intensity of the comment. So you wouldn't want to say, like if someone said, oh, you know, he just infuriates me when he's always late. So as a mediator, you wouldn't want to downplay that by he infuriates you. You know, you would want to really come back with a little bit more of the intensity of he really infuriates you when he's late. You see what I mean? You don't want to sound like so mellow and calming when you reflect back that it loses the strength of what that person is saying. And so I think that we're ready to go on. Does anyone have any questions about that or comments about reflection, what a reflection is? John?
I would add one thing. Reflections in the heat of a mediation. I encourage people, mediators, to use the person's name if there's some strong expression or some strong opinion or viewpoint. You know, Bill, and then you say where Bill just said he is. Because you'd never want to give the other Bill's other a sense that maybe you are siding with Bill. So when you just take, you know, Bill says all children should be stay in one at every night in the same home on a school night, okay? And so when that reflection, it's a really critical thing, you use Bill's name. So Bill, your view is that it's for the benefit of children in general, that they spend school nights in the same bed every school night, so that the other person, Mary or whatever, doesn't get the idea that you, the mediator, are echoing a standard, because one of the things we regularly get swept into as mediators is, well, what are the norms? Somebody will say, well, what's the right thing? What's the standard? So to avoid that trap, anytime you can, it helps to say, call the person's name, and that helps them own what they just said.
Yes, thank you, John. That's very true. So we don't want the speaker to think we're agreeing with them when we do the reflection. We want them to feel supported in what they said, but not that we personally are agreeing with them.
So can I just add, this is all good stuff, that when the conversation between the participants is heated or when it's angry, that's really important, and for us not to shy away from that, because that's where the work is to be done. You know, it's stuff they agree to, that's fine, you know, but when they're really locking horns, that's in the middle of that conflict experience. And one of the things I would add to the intensity part is the language is very important. So if somebody says, you know, we've known each other 10 years and you have treated me like shit for the entire time we've worked together, you know, and you reflect, well, you've known each other 10 years and it hasn't been a good working relationship. Boy, that loses a lot. So to the extent that you're comfortable with it, it's always good to stick to their language. And if somebody says the other one is a son of a bitch, you know, and unless you're just really too offended to say that, it's, you know, Willetta, you've said that I'm a son of a bitch ever since you've known me, you know, and so that's a big part of the conversation. So, okay, I'm sorry, that's enough.
Okay, because it is time to go into our little breakout rooms, and we're going to do a practice on reflective listening. So we'll be broken up into pairs, and what we want you to do is to take turns. First of all, one person is the speaker, and then the other is the listener. And so when you're the listener, you're not just listening like a dog, you're listening like a supportive human. So we want you to be supporting the speaker's conversation. When you see opportunities to lift up some emotion or something that's important, do it. And sometimes it's hard to get in because when a speaker's talking about something passionate, and I want, please, all of the speakers, think about something that means something to you to be able to talk about. So there's some meat in your story. And so the listener, if you can't jump in, if there's no breath taken from the speaker, maybe there's little words that you can just reflect in to show that you're listening. You know, you were sad. You didn't want it that way. You don't have to reflect all that they said. Just reflect the essence or an emotion, okay? And because you're just supporting them, you're helping them. Is that pretty clear? And then each person, how many minutes are we talking each, John?
5, I think. Let's see. So we have, we're scheduled to, yeah, we at most 5 minutes total. So each way. So we can do that.
Okay, so
Sure.
each speaker the first speaker speaks for 5 minutes, maybe just 4 minutes, and then get some feedback. How about that?
Okay.
We can debrief that a little bit.
So
I'm not sure when we go into the pairs, do we have something to start with, or how do we?
No, you're going to have your own story, something that you feel passionate about in your own life, that you can share with the other person. And then and then you'll switch. So each speaker will speak for maybe 3 or 4 minutes, or as long as you know you're able, while the listener is doing reflective listening. And then you'll have a little bit of debrief, like how was that for you? And then you'll switch. And then the speaker will become the listener and the listener will become the speaker. Is that clear?
Okay.
So, John, are you going to put us into breakout rooms?
No, I think Dusty's our technician.
Oh, Dusty.
Okay, so two of the groups will have 2 of you and a coach, and breakout room 3 is going to be Pam and Vicky. So Vicky will just be the speaker.
Yeah.
Okay. And it may take me just a second to join. I've got this set right now for I think 10 minutes, but come on.
Well,
Options.
10 minutes we'd be all right, Dusty. We have to get.
What are you saying, John?
10 minutes will be about right if we want to stay
Okay.
on schedule.
Yeah, that's what I
Okay,
thought.
so the speaker and listener, you're going to have to kind of be keeping track of your own time so you know when to switch, okay?
Well, each of us, there'll be a coach in each room, so.
Oh,
we
yeah,
can-
I'm sorry, there's not a coach in my room, so I'm talking to myself.
Because,
I'll have to
well,
keep
listen,
track.
You are the coach in your room. That's just one, but you can be AC/DC there.
Okay,
Here we go.
bye.
All right, you Dusty, you did the magic. Good for you.
Yay, Dusty. Okay, we lost Pam for just a minute, but she'll be right back. She just had to go to, there she is. Okay.
Well, Dusty, I think that you're up.
You're up,
I'm-
he's the guru of all summaries.
Yeah. Okay, good. So we're going to shift now where the reflections were really one-on-one, looking at one person, focusing on them, addressing them exclusively. And so that's very clear that you're not going back and forth at that point. A summary is different. A summary is when people have been talking for a while, maybe hopefully you've got a few notes on your page, and they might have covered one issue a lot, or they might have touched on a couple of different issues. And you're sort of keeping track of that by the issue they're talking about. And you really, when you come time to do the summary, you're going to really do it interactively like that. You're going to go back and forth to them as you speak through that summary. So let me pull the share screen up again for a minute here. So directly involves both parties, different than a reflection. It doesn't sound quite like a reflection. It's not literally using their words necessarily as much as kind of describing their conversation, what they had to say. That's the parts where they disagree about are still the meat of the issue. So it's nice to share what they're agreeing about, but it's really important to agree to share what they are still at loggerheads. And let's see, often it's followed by a check-in. So a summary is normally preceded by asking them permission to come in. Like, well, I'll do a little bit of that. It's so, like, you've been talking quite a while, last 10, 15 minutes on this issue, and you've got a lot on the table. Would it be helpful to sort of review your conversation? I actually try to use the word review instead of, would it be helpful to do a summary? Because sometimes people think you're ready to wrap up and they're not ready. But that's personal. And then when you finish your reflection going back and forth, that's when you most often I'd say, cap it off with a check-in. So what would you like to do now? Do you want to continue on these things you've been talking about, or do you need to get other issues on the table, or at least start talking about them? Where do you want to go? That'd be a check-in. So as a visual image, ISCT uses this, which I think is kind of like the image is good, even if your notes wouldn't look like this. It's bubbles and legs is what their training calls it. So you've got a topic or an issue that you kind of try to say clearly. And then on one side of your notes, you probably have what the participant A is thinking about that, saying about that, and on the other side, where participant B. What does that look like for you? It can look like anything, because people take different notes. People take notes in a way that makes sense to them. But as an example, here's my notes from a mediation Vic and I did a little while ago. It was with several people, kind of two sides of a local family that had an issue over inherited property. And here you can see my what I called these. You just label these what it sounds like to you too. So the first section here, they were talking about an offer that had been previously made on behalf of half of the family to the others, which was not satisfactory to the others. But that went back and forth. Here I can't even read the print on this, but I think it says the state of the property or the status of the property. Is it usable? Does it perk? Can you get a permit to build on it? And the third one was a fairness issue. And so going through there, you just talk down those, talk on through them. Fairness, this side of the family, you're saying that this is just not fair. You're not getting what your parents and grandparents wanted. For this side, you're thinking that, well, it is. So your understanding is clear that each family spur or family line was to maintain the property that they're parents or grandparents had. And, anyway, down through that. Your notes might look completely different. Oh, this is important to me because I never can remember names. So with more than 2 people talking, I generally draw a little diagram and put their names there. And then I still screw their names up. So we've got a little exercise.
Well, let me, Dusty, let me comment something.
Go
So
ahead.
when Dusty shows this, it looks like a photograph in time, but actually these topics would have discussed maybe over half an hour, or maybe 2 prior sessions, and this is the 3rd mediation session. So it looks like there's some kind of a chronological thing, but no, you go back to, so you leave plenty of space on your notes, or you put another, you repeat that topic, but that topic will come back and back in different perspectives on it, and you want to be able to, when doing the summary, be able to pick up the whole story to date, even though it may have taken place in different time periods, different sessions, so on. So the notes look a lot neater than the actual process of developing them. But it really is important to have the main topics down the center, and what, in this case for 2 parties, what's on each side, where they each are. And then as they reach agreement on something, you'll have that in there, and maybe there'll be a proposal to solve it, and you note the proposal on the left side, and then they'll say, okay, and so you put an okay on the other side and draw a line across, or arrows. I mean, it can be very creative, but the structure is tried and true as far as doing summaries. If you do just chronological listing of stuff, he says, and she says, then he says, whatever, you'll never get there with a summary unless you're a genius. This is for us.
Yeah, I agree. That's a good point. That's a good point, John. For instance, here, I might have taken this first note, 10 minutes into the mediation, and the second one, 25 minutes later, and you can go back and fill in the blanks, like John's saying, just collect them under those categories. You often can do that. So let me come out of this one, and we'll do just a real quick demo of this. Share screen. You're going to get, let's see, demo summary. We're going to, we've given you, I've sent them out, and actually this came out better than I thought on the screen, I think. Can you see that clearly? Are
Yeah.
you seeing? Okay, good. So this is what your little dummy notes are going to look like. So this one for my landlord tenant, I would just go, I read the top, it gives you the context. Robert's leased this apartment from Rachel. He's now, left the residence, wants his damage deposit back. So Robert and Rachel, you've talked a lot about a couple of issues here. Would it be helpful to just sort of review your conversation? Sure, that'd be great. Robert, you say you've been a good tenant. You've paid your rent on time every month, and you've had a good relationship. You feel like the 2 of you, that you've had a really good relationship with your landlord, and you've never caused her any issues. And these little demo things, because you haven't been there for the conversation, they kind of read right to left and top to bottom, so that just give you the flow. Okay, and Rachel, you're saying, well, he has been a good tenant, but it's a damage deposit, and you had to replace carpet, and you have to have the kitchen professionally cleaned. It's a business for you too. You need to make the mortgage that it's just important that he's responsible for that. Robert, you say, well, yeah, but that carpet wasn't new when you moved in, and really it's just normal wear and tear. And you cleaned the kitchen before leaving. Rachel, you say, well, it's true that the carpet wasn't new, but there was real damage. You might consider, you might be willing to share some of that cost, because it's true that it wasn't new carpet, but the kitchen is a different issue. You said the kitchen was had filthy cupboards, stains on the cabinets, grease baked into the stove and oven. You had to have it professionally cleaned. It was a mess. And then you moved on, you talked about why the money's important, you know, it's not personal, Rachel, it's your business. Like you said, you still have to pay your mortgage. It's fair and you need the money. Robert, you say, yeah, but you've got them, you're in a hard spot. You've got to move for your job. You need the money to get into your next place. You got to get your family settled across country here. Well, so what do you think? Is that, do you want to talk more about those things, or are there other things you want to talk about? Where do you want to go with this? Kind of get the flow? It's a little contrived, but it's just trying to give you an opportunity to just get the pace, get the flow of the summary again. And any questions about that? We're running a little low on time.
So I just had a really quick question that maybe is a quick answer, but I always worry that I'm leading, like, I started to say leading the witness, but that I'm leading the conversation and pushing it a certain way. And so I'm conscious that I worry that I'm doing that. So I try really hard not to do that. So what you did in that summary, I can envision the discussion previously. I can envision what each one said and maybe even, you know, their emotion as they were saying it. So I got a really good picture from that summary. Is there any way to just make sure we check ourselves and don't lead or drive a discussion a certain way?
Yeah, I think your point's well taken. It just monitoring where you are and sticking with what they've talked about. Try not to, you know, sort of favor the description of one side over the other, or find yourself asking questions that would, I mean, you know, just questions is a whole other thing. Just don't ask questions. Just try to talk. Just try to say what they said, and I think you'd be okay. That's good. Your concern for that is the answer to the question almost, you know, that you pay attention, and it's good that you worry about not leading them somewhere, because we don't want to do that. Okay. Did you have something, John?
No, we should move on, or move into breakout.
Yeah, we're going to lose a few minutes on this segment here, or, you know, collectively. So it's going to take me a minute to reconfigure these breakout rooms.
Who's going into my breakout room?
To breakout room 2.
And Willetta.
John goes to 3. Kathleen, Willetta goes to 1. This is a little more time consuming. Breakout room 3. Vicky, Kia, John. Vicky. Cam goes to 2. John, Pat, Willetta. Dusty. Can I go to 2 again? Katie and Pam. Vicky,
So how
Kia,
much
John.
time should we spend in our breakout rooms, John?
Well, I think to do the exercise, you need a minute to just read your story, everybody, and then another couple of 3 minutes to do a summary, and the coach will listen and give any feedback. So 1, 6, 7, about 8 or 10 minutes.
Let's go with,
Okay, so Dusty,
shall I go with 8 minutes and try to not get too much later?
Okay.
yes, well, so bring us back in 8 minutes.
Okay, I've got it set to come back at 8 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
And I need to join room 2.
Oh, we're going back. Okay, I'm sorry, guys.
I don't know why it says the host has muted everybody for a minute there.
Told us all to shut up.
So keep in mind, we just didn't, sending this out this morning was too much to expect. Any people would print it out, and you really, to do this exercise, you have to have it printed out. So for our purposes, we had we couldn't really carry the exercise out as written. But
Oh.
we did
But
our
I'm sure
best.
you made very good use of the time, John Roberts.
I think the only benefit with the kind of scripted thing there is just to kind of get a chance to have a feel for the kind of the rhythm and flow of a summary anyway. So I didn't try share screen in the breakout room. Did you?
No.
Yeah, John did. And I think we did, John, get a brief opportunity to practice that skill set.
So you were able to see the little script, the summary script?
Yes, John shared it with us.
Okay, because that was a
The
question
share.
we had, whether you could successfully do that in a breakout room or not.
Well,
I'm thinking that maybe we should take a 10-minute break. And then when we come back, I'll quickly go over the last two skills and then we can do our role plays. How does that feel for everybody?
Sure.
That's a check-in.
Sounds good.
Okay, 10-minute break.
Okay.
So it's that means until 7 minutes too.
I've got 43, so 53 would be 7 minutes too. Yeah, time 53, coming back.
Hey, Karen. Let's get you up now.
Running a little bit behind.
John, I have to do the last portion of this, the last half an hour on my phone.
Okay.
So hopefully that doesn't pose a problem.
No, as long as you know how to do that. Now here's the trick. um, uh, it, so you're going to take your video off, is that right, Willetta?
I can do it on or off. What's best?
Okay, so here's the thing.
Uh-huh.
I suggest what you do is go totally off
Uh-huh.
and then log back in, because
Okay.
Zoom has a way, if you want to midstream switch from
Well, here's what I'll do, John. I won't do audio only. I'll just log in into the Zoom full version on my phone. Would that work?
wait, no, what can happen is that your phone will be treated as a separate person than you, and you could be sent to different rooms. It's crazy. No, so and happened to me in a workshop. Welcome my lovely former co-mediator and spouse, Karen Horton. So Willetta, log off completely, come back on, and when you do that, it'll ask about the phone, and then you can dial in the phone number, and then it'll keep you and your picture and the phone as one person.
Okay, I'm not sure if I understand. What I was going to do is log off from my laptop and just log in to Zoom from my phone.
Okay, all right, fine.
And I can actually log in now, so that way that there won't be a disconnect.
Yeah,
You'll see me you'll see me in there twice, but I'm going to log off from the laptop, but I'll still be on Zoom via my cell phone. So it shouldn't be a
Okay.
break.
Okay, good. You're a pro.
No. Just wanted to let you know. Okay, John, you see me? Oops, a minute.
Right. You're muted, Willetta. You're on your phone?
Okay, I had to turn off one of my mics so I wouldn't get the echo. You'll see me in there
Okay.
twice. And the second name is Willetta Love 2, and that's my cell phone.
Okay, so
When I drop off, you won't see my
Okay,
Willetta Love 2 is my cell phone. Just know that when you break us out into rooms, and then I'll drop off for my laptop eventually.
okay. So Dusty's gonna have to put both of you in the breakout room until, as long as there are both of you around.
Okay.
Well,
I may have
actually,
a,
it doesn't, as long as he just moves one of you in, the other one will just be somewhere else. Oh, my.
I think I had the room set up, and I think that I'll have to redo them all after if Willetta checks back in. I'll see. That'll slow us up a little.
It shouldn't. If you just move the two Willettas into wherever you're going to move, we won't skip a beat.
I only see one Willetta though.
In your participant, you should see a Willetta Love 2.
Well, I see Willetta Love 2 on the screen, but because you checked in after I made the group out, I don't get a choice to put you in the room.
Oh, hopefully you can manually move me over there, hopefully.
That's what I'm looking
Go to
at.
go to participants.
Participants. Well, yeah, I can see it in participants, but it doesn't give me a choice to, she doesn't show up in the choices for, not share screen, that's not what I want, for the breakout room. So I've just got to go and, what's this one? Get rid of that. I've got to cancel this and just do it again.
Dusty, you can also stop recording at this point.
Oh, good. Oh, it doesn't, let's see. Oh yeah, stop recording.